Yo, hey guys, it's SmallmouthCrush on behalf of Monster Bass. I want to make a real quick video talking about a bait that I actually got in my box yesterday. Pretty excited about this. This guy's been around for a very long time, longer than I've been on this earth. It's actually been around 40 plus years now. That's the Norman DD22, and it's a super cool crankbait that, man, I got boxes of Norman DD22s, and I got some real special ones. I don't even take out the package. I should. This one still says designed for Rick Clunn. I mean, this is some old school. You know, this crankbait's been around for a while. It probably deserves to be thrown, but I would hate to lose that. It's almost like a collector's item. But I got a few still in the real old packages, but then I have a bunch of favorites that I'll throw on a regular basis to this day. And so I want to talk about the setup for throwing a bigger deep diving crankbait, as well as some of the different DD22s that they make, as well as some of the applications. And specifically, a lot of people have thrown this bait in the past for largemouth, and I'm telling you right now, smallmouth bass love this bait as well, and I throw it a lot up here in the Northeast, so we're going to talk all about that. So here's the bait that actually came in the box. This is the DD22, but this is a Sexy Shad chrome color, which is a really good color when you have a little bit of sunlight and that sun can reflect off of that chrome. Gives off a really good flash as it's coming through the water. Now, for years, this was like the original crankbait when you were ledge fishing. When people first started exploring offshore and realizing there's massive schools of fish, especially in the Tennessee River and some of the other areas across the country, where these fish will actually go way offshore, away from the bank, and this was a very effective technique to catch those fish. And so it's just been forgotten because a lot of different crankbaits have come on the market since then. And I'm sure they sell them pretty good still to this day. But in my opinion, I just don't see a lot of guys using it. And I think that can be an advantage sometimes, especially if you're fishing a situation where those fish get a lot of pressure. Sometimes the original doesn't get used as much, and all these newer fancy type of crankbaits are out. There's nothing fancy really about this this Norman DD22. Now they make 3 different styles, and it's really a dull kind of thumping action when it's going through the water. It's nothing special to me to see it. There's nothing flashy about this thing, but the fish love it. I promise you that. Now, as I said earlier, I use it a lot for smallmouth. But there's a lot of guys that will be throwing these baits for largemouth as well across the country. So you want to be familiar with the 3 different types. So they make the original Norman DD22. It's going to go down to about 18 feet. You know, a lot of people think it'll, because it says 22, it'll reach that 22. Maybe on a super long cast and lighter line, 8-pound test perhaps, you could get it down that deep. But chances are, 18 feet is going to be about the max, and you have to really make some long casts. If you have some windy conditions, you really want to get that wind to your back in order to make that super long cast. But they also make a DD22 HD, and what that is, that's just a little bit heavier than the original, and so that's going to allow you to get a little bit longer cast. It has a little bit different sound. It's going to get to about the same depth, but it is going to help you get that bait out further. And then they also make a silent version, and basically that just doesn't have any rattles. It's super quiet. The only thing you're going to hear is the hooks, the treble hooks, as they move back and forth when you're bringing that crankbait back through the water column. Okay, so when it comes to smallmouth fishing with a DD22, I'll throw these in any clear body of water, whether it be an inland lake or the Great Lakes or any of the tributaries, the river systems of the Great Lakes. That's when this comes into play for me. And anytime those fish are in that 12 to 18 foot of water, 12 to 20, you don't necessarily have to be digging the bottom with this bait. Generally with any deep diving crankbait, when you're going after smallmouth, you don't necessarily need to have that crankbait hitting the bottom, deflecting off the bottom. A lot of times 3 to 5 feet above where those fish are positioned is going to be good enough to help you get some bite. So when it comes to color, there's a lot of them. I have a lot of different colors here. I got a chrome chartreuse back, a a couple different versions of fire tiger. Matted fire tiger with some glitter on it. Your standard chartreuse and blue bass. Citrus. I got some crayfish, some minnow bait looking ones. Look at this thing here. I don't even know, but that's pretty cool. Then of course I got some dark red tomato color, if you want to call it that. That might be actually what that color's called. There's a lot of different colors. If I had to pick one, my confidence color for largemouth, it's going to be this, I believe it's called root beer. It's a root beer color crankbait. It's got a little chartreuse, a little green glitter, a little bit of orange on the belly, and then kind of a darker, almost like a green pumpkin back. It's a real good color that I have confidence on. That it would probably be the first color I'd pick up if I was fishing for largemouth with a DD22. Now if I was going for smallmouth, I pretty much decided on these two colors. I'm going to use this one first. This is a chartreuse. I don't even know what this is called. It might be a bumblebee. They have some unusual color or names for it. But you see a lot of chartreuse here. It's got an orange belly, a darker back, probably like a fire tiger looking deal. It looks like a perch going through the water. Of course it has that chartreuse, which is always good when you're fishing for smallmouth. They love that little chartreuse on any type of crankbait that you're throwing. Is real important. So this one here gets my vote, but then I also like throwing like a sexy shad color. Really any shad color, but what's neat about the sexy shad is it has just a little bit of chartreuse going through it as well. So these two colors right here are going to be my main go-to, and I seem to have more success, believe it or not, when I'm throwing the crankbait for smallmouth when it's sunny. With a little bit of wind and sun, these crankbaits can be deadly. So I actually just took this one out of the package to show you guys, but the only modification that I would make, well, there's some complicated modifications that we won't get into this video. One is actually adding, bending the bill either slightly up or down. If you bend it up, it's going to allow that bait to dive just a little bit deeper, and if you force it down slightly, it's actually going to rise a little bit in the water column when you're bringing that in. And how you do that is real simple. It just takes some boiling water, a clamp to hold this crankbait over the boiling water, and you let that steam heat up this plastic here, and then you can take a pliers, make sure you have gloves on, and you can just gently bend that bill. Not a lot of movement, just a little bit, and that sometimes can make a difference. But normally I don't. I do have a few marked with a marker in this box where I've done that, so I know that they run a little bit deeper, a little bit shallower. However, the only real modifications that I would do, conscious of the hooks that you're using. Out of the package, the standard hooks that come with it, they'll work, but if you're in a tournament situation, or you do everything possible to get that fish in the boat. And sometimes, for some reason, with a lot of crankbait manufacturers, they don't put the best hooks that are out there. So they come standard with round bends, and there's nothing wrong with round bends, but I would put maybe some Gamakatsu or whatever type of brand round bend you have confidence in. I would replace the factory hooks with those. I'll also throw triple grips a lot on the Norman DD22, and here you can see I have triple grips on these baits as well. One's a short shank, one's a little bit longer. I was just really experimenting with the difference. I tend to gravitate now towards the short shank triple grips. So something to keep in mind if you're throwing a DD22 for smallmouth. There's going to be times when they're going to come up and inhale that bait, and a triple grip is going to pin them really well. There's going to be other times when you're out there and you're going to get hits, and you're going to lose that fish, or you're going to bring the fish in and notice that it's hooked on the outside of the mouth. If that's happening, and that depends on a whole lot of different things, could be the basically the conditions, the mood of the fish. If they're just swiping at this bait, you're going to want to make sure you have a good pair of round bend hooks on that bait, because triple grips, when they swipe, you have a better chance of losing a fish with triple grips if they're just swiping the bait. Now, if it's on and they're grabbing and they're inhaling the bait and you know the strikes are, you're not losing fish, you're really going to want to put these triple grips on, because that's going to help them stay pinned when they jump and go all crazy like smallmouth do. So when I'm throwing the DD22, I'm going to throw it like a medium to medium fast retrieve through the water. I want to keep this bait moving. One thing you'll find is it's not going to get hung up as often as some other crankbaits that are out there. It's very buoyant, so it's going to back out of cover quite easily. I mean, you can crash this in the brush piles and dig it into some ledges, things like that, and you're going to find that you won't lose as many crankbaits just because of the buoyancy and how this doesn't get, you know, hung up as often. Now, if you're crashing into rocks in shallow water, especially jagged, you know, boulders and riprap, things like that, yes, you definitely can get caught. This bill is gonna catch that. But a lot of times, again, when I'm cranking, I'm not necessarily, for smallmouth anyways, I'm not necessarily interested in making sure that I'm constantly digging on the bottom. So as far as the equipment, I would recommend throwing this on a bait casting setup. 7 foot would probably be the shortest rod I would use. 7.5 to 8 foot, you know, cranking stick basically. Something that you have confidence in, you know, that you can throw a crankbait, you know, that longer rod is just going to help you make further casts as well as play that fish a little bit better. For largemouth, I do like more of a fiberglass rod when I'm deep cranking these baits, so something that's a little bit more forgiving. Now, oftentimes when I'm fishing for smallmouth, however, that fiberglass rod almost just gives that fish, I don't know how to say it. We'll put it this way, I seem to lose more smallmouth when I'm throwing on fiberglass than I would at like a more, just a size up heavier rod. And I think that has to do with the way the fish bites as well as fights differently than a largemouth. Could just be all in my head. I'm sure and I've caught plenty of smallmouth on a fiberglass rod, but if I was specifically going to say, you know what, this is the pattern, this is what we're doing, they're biting it, I would make sure that I have just a little bit heavier rod if I'm throwing it for smallmouth. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, if you're going to use a high-speed reel like a 7-to-1 or 8-to-1 or 9-to-1, or they probably make 12-to-1s nowadays, you're going to get burnt out by it. These are not easy baits to reel in. There's a lot of friction going on. That water is really grabbing this bill, which allows it to do its magic, but man, you will get tired out if you're throwing that on a high-speed reel. So I would suggest a 6.2 or smaller. If you can go with a 5-to-4 gear ratio, that's just going to allow you to have more torque to be able to pull that crankbait through the water column. Now keep in mind, you're not going to be able to catch up and reel as quickly, but it's going to save your wrist and keep you, you know, allow you to, you'll give up. A half hour of throwing it, 20 minutes on a high-speed reel, and you're sore. I don't care how tough you are. So a 5-to-4, you know, 6-to-2, something like in that range is going to help you be able to fish this more comfortably all day long. So as far as line, 12-pound fluorocarbon, especially for open water, should be good to go. If you're fishing largemouth, a little heavier cover, you want to get down, you know, maybe you want to fish some brush piles in that 12-foot range, and you don't really need to get down any deeper. But you know that, you know, it can get a little sketchy when you get a fish, perhaps 15 to 17. But I think for the most part, a good 12-pound fluorocarbon line, you shouldn't have too many issues with being able to get that fish in the boat. Well, hey, there you go. DD22s, really cool little crankbait. Give them a try this year. Give them a try while we still got some open water. There's plenty of time. The fall bite's going on. There's still going to be plenty of fish that are going to bite this. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.